filming us this afternoon, but instead we have the wonderful Sandy Adams that is filming us. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Excellent. So welcome to Asbury United Methodist Church. Thank you for being here. If you're visiting, I just have to say, I hope you'll stop back by again at another time. Today we're here doing our Asbury Showcase, Oral History Showcase. My name is Pandit Wright. It's been my pleasure to work on this project this past year. I had the pleasure of interviewing 3 of the distinguished panelists that you're going to meet later. And I just want to quickly start by just telling you a little bit about the housekeeping and what we're going to experience this afternoon. As I mentioned, we do have 5 panelists today. We're going to try to keep this to a couple of hours only, because otherwise we'll be here when service is starting tomorrow. I know Pastor would not like that to happen. So we're going to try to keep ourselves on schedule and make up the time that we have. The starting part of the program will be video clips. We're going to show you some videos from the over 1 hour or so of oral history that was taped for each of the 5 panelists. We're going to start with that. And we'll take a very short 5-minute or so break. Panelists will come to the stage at that point. And then when they rejoin, when they come up to the stage, Adelle Banks is going to be your moderator today, and she will ask a general question that the panel will answer. When that is done with, you will have, as the audience, you will be able to join the discussion. So, looking forward to a wonderful afternoon. Just in terms of housekeeping, bathrooms are to the left, snacks are to the right, and hopefully your participation, did I say that wrong? Yeah. What? My right, your left. There you go. So hopefully, again, thank you for being here. We welcome you and we hope you enjoy yourselves this afternoon. Ruth?
Hello. Hi. My name is Ruth Robinson, and I'm the project manager for this particular project. I'm here to introduce all of the players in this drama. You just heard from Pandit, and she told me that she was one of the interviewers. We actually had 2 interviewers. The other is Adelle Banks over there, and working with them were 2 videographers, Sandy Adams over here, and Duane Williams is here somewhere. I don't see him at the moment. Oh, okay. But the stars of the show are really and they told them so beautifully, and you will see that when you see the videos. So I'm going to introduce them now. Mrs. Josephine Baker, they'll be coming up later. She's a pioneer in the development of DC charter school system. Then we have Dr. Clive Callender right up here, and he is also a pioneer in kidney transplantation. We have Mrs. Audrey Drake, who is retired Brigadier General and a DC National Guard commander. And the last of our narrators is retired Colonel Cardell Richardson Sr, who now serves as Inspector General for the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. And last but not least is Reverend Dr. James Shopshire, who's sitting back in the audience. He's Professor Emeritus of the Wesley Theological Seminary, and you'll hear about that from his clips. But I'd also like to give a shout out to Jasper Collier back there. He is the Deputy Director of Humanities DC, who worked with us and also gave us the money to do this project. But I just wanted you to know that he is here with us today.
Good afternoon. I'm Calvin Childs.
Asbury United Methodist Church has established its own collection of oral histories starting in 2014. But in 2017, we learned of the opportunity to work with the DC Oral History Collaborative, a new organization seeking to identify oral histories being kept by different entities around the District of Columbia. The DCOHC was also offering grants to help organizations add more original stories to their collections. And since that was an excellent match of their interests and ours, we went ahead and signed on. I was recruited to write the grant application, and I attended an introductory workshop on what the DCOHC was all about. I worked with our historian at the time, Marion Tatum Webb, to get information on Asbury's background, filled out the application, fired it off, and we learned we did not get the grant. So as the saying goes, better luck next year. We applied again this year, and this time around we got guidance from Maggie Lemire, who is the DCOHC's Director of Community Engagement and Consultant Oral Historian. She graciously evaluated our previous application and gave us tips on how to make it stronger. The key was to make the case that Asbury has something special. We have a connection to history in the District of Columbia, narrators who are accomplished individuals in various fields, and stories from those narrators that illustrate various facets of district life. We also needed to better explain how we would draw upon DCOHC's guidance and resources along the way. Our application for the grant included capsule descriptions of our narrators, a detailed budget, a timeline showing when our team would complete each stage of work, a SoundCloud link to one of the histories in Asbury's collection, and a list of all of the oral histories in Asbury's collection. So with that, I collaborated with everyone on our team to gather the necessary information, and I kept our senior pastor, Reverend Dr. Arantha Mills, and our trustee chair, Josephine Baker, apprised of our progress. And in March, we got the happy news that our request was funded. Our team has been working diligently to interview, record, and edit the stories from our 5 narrators for today. But our work is not yet complete because we still need to deliver a report about the entire adventure for the DCOHC by the end of the year, which I will compile. And if our team is willing, we can prepare for next year's adventure. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Adelle Banks. Very happy to be here. I'm very happy that you are all here with us. And I just wanted to explain a little bit more of the process and basically answer the question about why we did oral history. It is really an honor to present what our oral history team has been working on since late last year. I started conducting oral histories of Asburyans in 2014, and by 2017 had completed 17, starting with Bishop in Residence Forrest Stitt, and then others, including lay members, educators, DC government employees, and people active on different levels of the United Methodist Church. Most have been video interviews, but some have been solely audio interviews. The DC Oral History Collaborative has noted that Asbury's oral history collection exists, and it's in its survey of collections. I also have done dozens of oral history interviews for the African American Methodist Heritage Center, including Joseph Lowery and James Lawson, people known for their work in the Civil Rights Movement, and those are for that center's private collection. So the question we hope to answer today is why oral history? The basic reason is that it allows people to tell their stories themselves in their own words, providing a record that no one else can while they still can. As I sit with narrators, which is the term we use for the people being interviewed, I feel like I am hearing witnesses to history and hope to eventually share their personal slices of history with others. This is one of the rare opportunities to do that publicly today. I also had the opportunity to present snippets of Asbury's oral histories last year when I was on a panel at the annual conference on DC history. I spoke about the interviews I did in 2017 after training with the DC Oral History Collaborative. Some audio clips were played of my interview with Sandra Kingshaw, who was a member of a Girl Scout troop at Asbury, and later was one of the first Black area managers of the Girl Scout Council in the DC area. Now you will get to see a bit of the finished product of 2018 interviews done by our team. Pandit, Wright, as she said, interviewed 3 people and I interviewed 2. It has been a multi-step process to get where we are today. As he explained, Kelvin Tiles applied for the DC Oral History Collaborative Grant with input from other Asburyans. Before we learned in March that we had received the grant, our new team met in December to make plans for interviews in 2018, whether we received the grant or not. As you have heard, our team included Ruth Robinson, who has shepherded our full fulfilling of the grant requirements, and Sandy Adams and Duane Williams, who served as videographers, photographers. Pandit and I had attended volunteer training last year offered by the collaborative. The workshops held once a week for 3 weeks gave us excellent advice on best practices. Sandy, Duane, and Ruth attended training earlier this year about the specifics for grant recipients. Pandit and I researched our narrators and had pre-interviews with them to prepare all of us for the upcoming interviews. By the summer, we interviewed our 5 narrators, some at Asbury and some at their homes. We then created transcripts of the interviews, reviewed each other's transcripts, and shared them with the narrators to check them for accuracy, spelling, and other input. I edited video clips that will be shown to you momentarily. I hope to make these clips combined in YouTube playlists public soon so that you will be able to share them with others by searching for Oral History and Asbury United Methodist Church. We thank the narrators for their willingness to share their stories, and we hope that they will give you new insights about our church, our community, and the fields to which they have contributed. So I'm going to briefly introduce each set of video clips before they start. We will start with Mrs. Josephine Baker, a founding member of DC Charter School Board, whose clips deal with segregation in Washington, teaching mythology as a middle school teacher, her memories of our church, and her work in charter schools.
We were insulated. It's amazing when you look back how much we were protected from things that your parents had, existing for them in the South. I walked less than a block to school. I could walk a block and a half to 11th Street from my home on Ring Street, and I actually caught the bus there to go down to 11th and K, which is where Asbury is, and that bus still runs today. That same bus, same route. And I went to Pandit. I was able to walk to school, maybe because it's not that far. I could walk or ride to Dunbar, depending on time and friends. And so there was something about segregation that forces you to depend on each other in a way that you might not, which we know now. So many young people lack that sense of community because this is what you were, this is where you were, this is what you had. So DC was a very segregated place. Going downtown, I remember the experience not until an adult that I realized what the protection was that my father was giving me. We would go downtown on the Georgia Avenue bus, or the trolley probably, and we would go into what was then a 5 or 10 cent store, and they had a lunch counter, and I would want to buy a hot dog, and my dad would say, well, I'll buy you a hot dog, but we'll take it home. And I could never understand, well, I can't eat the hot dog here. Well, he was not going to have me have to stand and eat the hot dog, because you could not sit at the counter and eat the hot dog if you were African American. So but it took me as an adult to understand that dynamic. And yeah, I got the hot dog, but I had to bring it home and make my popcorn. And whatever we were going downtown for, we did that. But this was a kind of a treat, but it was not a treat that other non-African Americans had to modify. I don't know exactly how this love of mythology developed, but I began to read myths along with my interest in ancient civilizations, and so that as a part of my program here again, because I had a very, I would say generous, but flexible administrator who said, you know, if these are things that you think will benefit children, then do them as long as the kids do well. My kids always scored in the 90 plus percentile in testing, but more than that, they became thinkers. And this is really what you want. You want creative thinkers and cognitive thinkers. So the more I dealt with the mythology and the ancient civilizations, the more I realized how I could use it as a vehicle for expanding their knowledge. And so much so that I got a KFIS grant, and I actually went to Greece. And actually, the one exciting thing is that I took a picture of the ruins of the Athena temple. And when I came back and we were looking at a textbook that had some historical mythology kinds of, or ancient civilization kinds of things, the same temple was in their textbook. And that was, so it meant a reality to them that this really existed. I had a picture, and the other picture was in the textbook, and these kinds of things. So mythology then developed into a part of my own curriculum. I used part of my grant to get books that provided them with lots of myths and so forth. And then a culminating activity, one of the years was I had an artist who was an artist in residence, and she did printmaking. And so they did printmaking, and they did it for lots of things, but then the culminating activity was for them to decide what mythological person or scene that they want to describe, and to do it through art and printmaking. And we did an art show. And I had a parent who put some wood panels on the wall so that we could hang their paintings. And then the refreshments were all Greek food. So it was just carrying all of that to that maximum. And so that was fun. And as you had mentioned earlier, yes, we read Homer. And while we read a children's Homer, it was still in the language of Homer. I did Shakespeare with my kids. And I did it through the Shakespeare Theater. And they had actually 10-minute performances of a section of a play. And they had to do it in the language of Shakespeare. So many times I would take a Shakespeare play and condense it. And take out, well, Shakespeare repeats, Shakespeare wants to say the same thing over and over and over, just with different words. And so I could condense it so that they could present that. So they did Hamlet and Midsummer Night's Dream and all that. So I had fun. And to me, how do you go to work every day and not enjoy it? So I had fun. I loved kids. I pushed them, and I had kids to come back years later saying, I finally get it. You really were making me do what I needed to do in order to be where I am now.
Are there any other stories that you would like to share with us about just sort of how Asbury made you feel, being a part of that church family? How did it sort of, resonate with you going forward as well?
Well, I think it was a part of who I am, and it goes farther than myself, and I say that because, particularly my second daughter, just remembers Asbury as being nurturing and looking out for its young people, and she will to this day remember things. She knew, and when she comes back to visit, she just feels that this is home, because people always were caring and supportive. We had our young people playing their musical instruments for our choir concerts when we did the Messiah. They would play, and they would bring some of their playing mates in the DC Youth Orchestra, because my kids played in the DC Youth Orchestra, and we would have orchestral accompaniment. They were involved in just everything that the church did. So it was family. And while, yes, they were children and young adults, or even teenagers before they became young adults, they were valued. And so I think that valuing supported both the parents as well as the children.
And did you feel that way too when you were growing up in the church? If your mother and father had said, you better be at church on Sunday morning or whatever, would you have still done the Asbury?
Well, didn't have a choice. And my father was not an Asbury. My father was Baptist, and they decided early in their marriage that she would stay Methodist and he would stay Baptist, and there was no conflict. And occasionally I went to his church as a visitor. But my brother went with my father to church, and the two girls went with my mother to church. And no conflict, it was just what we did. So it all worked so very smoothly, you know. It's sort of like in retrospect, because that was how we functioned.
And you enjoyed it?
Yes, definitely. And from Sunday school to plays in Sunday school to youth choir, you know, to all of that. And of course, from the youth choir, even when I was at Howard singing in the Howard choir, when I could, I sang with the youth choir. And then of course, when I married and moved away, then of course I was no longer involved in the church. Paul asking me to consider being on the DC Public Charter School Board. And thought about it because I was not anti-DCPS. I did not have any no beefs. You know, I didn't want to do anything that I thought was meant to destroy or to minimize. But I was going to put this: how does this help children? Is this something that can be beneficial for the city? And my analysis, not based on a lot of information, there wasn't a lot to get, that it seemed to be something that could make a difference. And so that's when I did accept that offer to have my name submitted and was subsequently chosen as one of the original 7 members of the DC Public School Board.
And then how long before you became executive director?
About 2.5 years. We had an executive director who left, and we went about 6 or 8 months searching, and we weren't getting the kinds of responses, or we had some interviews, but it didn't seem there were not that many good fits by that time. Because I was retired, and though I was still teaching at DW, I was able to be in the office a lot to make sure that things moved along. And they said, well, you're doing it, you're doing what needs to be done, maybe you should take the job. And so that's not going to happen.
What was the biggest, what the most positive change that you believe you were able to effect when you were with the charter school movement?
Well, we're certainly able to provide choice to parents who wanted to have a choice. And because we, as a board, had an attitude, non-political attitude about what was our job, what was it that we were being asked to do under this law, and the way in which to do this that was going to serve children well, and was not going to, if at all possible, right? There's no perfect world, and there's no perfect charter school, and there's no perfect teacher. We know all of that, but then what can we put together that's going to provide something that's strong enough to take children where they need to go? Because the bottom line is that's what it's all about. It's not about the adults, it's not about the superintendents, it's not about the DC Public Charter School Board. It's all about how do we serve children.
And what did you see? If you looked at it and you said, all right, I'm proud of this, I can look at this and see some positive change that has been made, or something that you felt or measured, your statistics, something that you measured in terms of that.
Well, I think that what we have been able to accomplish, maybe, and there are those who will refuse to deny it and say it's not really what has happened. But I think over time there has been the recognition that, first of all, one school doesn't fit all, that we do need a variety, that we do need choices, not only in the school but in the approach. Just as you and your family, did you treat each of your children, whether they were 2 or 6, the same? Were they the same? Obviously not. And so how do you make that happen in a public situation? And of course I feel that public education is essential. I don't think we can give every parent X number of dollars to go find a school, because that's abdicating our responsibility to provide meaningful education. So I think that we just have, I think that charter schools have provided a kind of choice that certainly for a while we were ignored, or rather there was not, we were the enemy with those in DCPS, and but we kept on doing what we thought was the appropriate thing and the right thing to do. And somewhere along the way, there were a number of things that we did that the school system began to say, well, maybe we can do a little of this, or well, certainly maybe looking at themselves in a way that brought about some of the changes that maybe have made some things better. I know we hear all the bad stuff, you know, of high school and that, but in the long run, I have to believe, and we have to believe that somehow things have moved upward. And are they where they need to be? Obviously not. Test scores are not the only thing, and I don't know either. You have to have something concrete to measure. And when you have that concrete item, it doesn't really tell you everything that you need to know what's happening in education. So I don't know that I don't know what the solution to that is. But we have to keep remembering that children are our most valuable resource. And if we don't educate them well, then we're going to find ourselves in even more trouble than we are already.
Next, we will learn Callender, a transplant surgeon, including his childhood church in Harlem, his interest in medical missionary work, his involvement in Asbury's ministries, and his work as a kidney transplant surgeon.
Listening to a sermon, and I was impressed by the fact that by becoming a medical missionary, I could heal the bodies of mankind and also the souls of mankind. So at the age of 7, I purposed that this would be my destiny in life, and that I wanted to become a medical missionary. And so from that point on, that was my whole direction of my life, to become a medical missionary. Now, around between the ages of 7 and age of 15, my life was very occupied with the church. I learned how to read going to church. I learned how to, all my singing in the church, acting, playing, everything I did revolved around the church. Sunday from, I guess about 9 o'clock in the morning until 6 to 8 p.m. at night, I was in church. Monday there was the praying band. Tuesday was prayer and testimony. Thursday was Bible study. Friday was choir rehearsal. So that I spent most of my young life in church, and as a consequence, I didn't hang out with a lot of the other kids who felt their main thing was get a juvenile delinquency card and other things that went on. So I was part of that. I was primarily in the church, and this was one of the greatest things that happened to me because it formed the rest of my life. Then at the age of 15, I contracted pulmonary tuberculosis, and this at that point in 1951 was often a fatal illness, and so I was separated from my family, went to the hospital, and was actually in the hospital for 18 months, which is an interesting way to spend your teenagers. But I learned so much at that hospital. I saw patients to the right of me, to the left of me dying, and I saw a lot of things that happened that helped me appreciate the faith that I developed while I was at Ebenezer Gospel Tabernacle. My faith in God, my experience with praying and fasting and Bible study, and actually in my younger days I was a real Bible scholar and won many prizes and contests as a Bible student. So this fortification helped me after I completed my surgical residency, and Fern and I got married, my dream came true because one of the surgical residents was from Nigeria. And he knew I wanted to be a medical missionary, and his country in Nigeria, they had a Biafran civil war. And the Port Harcourt Hospital needed restoration. And so Kaiser Foundation International wanted somebody to go over there and lead a team that would restore the hospital. And so this is my chance to have my medical missionary dream come true. He introduced me to that. I went out to California and met with them, and I recognized this was an opportunity for me to go to Africa, go into the bush, be a missionary, and have my life's dream come true. So I shared this with Fern, and although I thought that we talked about this when we got married, and that this is what was expected, it seemed to be a surprise to her that we were going to be going to Africa so suddenly. Because I had just finished my surgical residency, and it was the chance of my lifetime, and I wasn't going to let it pass by. And so we then left D.C. and went straight to Africa, where we spent the first 9 months in Africa doing surgery, going into the bush, ministering, and so my life dream came true. The only problem that occurred as a consequence of it was that I lost 40 pounds in 9 months. And I wasn't heavy to start with, but to lose 40 pounds when I came back, I was like a skeleton to everybody else who had seen me before I went there. And so the question was, why did I lose this weight, and was Africa really for me? This was 1970 when I went there, and this was early 1971. And so there was a transplant fellowship available that I considered, and I decided I would do that because general surgery to me wasn't challenging. Transplant surgery was new and exciting, but I thought before I really go to Minnesota to do this transplant fellowship, I go back to Africa for another 3 months and see how that happens, see how that works out, and maybe I'll still do more medical missionary work. Well, when I went back to Africa this 3 months, I lost 20 pounds again, and this time I got malaria. And so I kind of figured that maybe Africa was not for me. And so that I had my opportunity to do 12 months of medical missionary work, and I decided that maybe my missionary work would be in the United States. And so with that, I went to University of Minnesota, left all black Nigeria, went to almost all white Minnesota, and did my transplant surgery fellowship from 1971 to 1973. So anyway, I did the transplant fellowship in University of Minnesota, did research as well as surgery, did about 200 transplants while I was at Minnesota, and learned all there is about kidney transplantation. And so I then came back after
200 cases. Is there one that stood out for you?
Well, there are a couple that stood out for me. One was there was a patient who I had a transplant, and she had complications, and she must have arrested about 100 times, and I resuscitated her 100 times, and she left the hospital and did well for many years. So that was one case that I'll never forget. Doreen Wanaka was her name, but her case showed me that you should never give up. And I never gave up on her, and she walked out of the hospital. The other case, Danny K, actually, I worked on his transplant.
Danny K?
Yeah, Danny K, right. I worked on his transplant. And so those two are two of the ones that I'm thinking more of. Of course, the thing that was outstanding was that out of those 200, there may have been 2 black patients. So this was primarily a white experience. But it set the stage for everything else, and so I came back then to Howard University in 1973 to start the transplant program at Howard University. Because of the neighbor-to-neighbor breakfast, I became part of that committee. And one of the things that I thought was important was to give a medical aspect of it, so that as part of the neighbor-to-neighbor, we introduced about 5 to 15 minutes of medical information that we share with them every fourth Sunday.
That's when we sit back up and make sure we're explaining what the neighbor breakfast is for those who don't.
Yes, the neighbor breakfast is something that Asbury's been doing probably for the last 20 to 30 years, in which they have a free breakfast for all of the community that is interested. Usually it's the homeless, but it's not necessarily only homeless. It's people who want to get a free breakfast. And so they have about 400 people that come in every fourth Sunday. And so I was so impressed because I wanted to become part of that committee. But I also saw this as an opportunity to educate them about medical ministry. And so as a consequence of doing that, we also decided that maybe we should also do a newsletter that comes out every first Sunday that talks about medical issues. And so we started that maybe about 2 or 3 years ago.
And that's in the bulletin.
That's in the bulletin.
You give tips about what kinds of things.
Everything, every medical illness you can imagine. Talk about from migraine to brain tumors to cancer to allergies to the need for vaccinations, men's health, women's health, you name it, we talk about it because it's important for us to be healthy souls and minds and bodies. And so I like to share those messages to increase the health of the Asburyans and all who would read the bulletin.
And then there's also the health fair.
Then the health fair, yeah, I forgot about that. Then the health fair that we used for the community as well as for the Asbury community as well, to improve the health.
It's been a couple of years that you've done that?
It's been about 3 years that we've done that, and it's been very successful, and we've been able to help people make some diagnoses of cancers that would have been missed, and also helped others to regain their health. I think it's something that I've been blessed to be used to help others. And the one thing that I've always wanted to do is to share whatever I have with others, whether it's my voice or whatever gifts I have to use to the honor and glory of God. And that's what my life has been all about for so far. And there have been many people who I've heard testify that they made it because Asbury was there. And the things they did to help them when they were homeless and they didn't have anything is what helped them to survive through and then make it through the night and make it till tomorrow. And then tomorrow they became successful people because of it. And that community ministry that Asbury has had throughout the 50 years that I've been with it is something that has endeared itself to me and makes me want to be part of it and to do what is necessary to help us survive and thrive through the next generations. One of the things about getting older, as I had my 81st birthday last November, is that I believe that you should use the gifts that God gives you as long as you can. And as long as I have health and I'm able to do it, I will do it. And when I can't, I'll stop. And it will be easy for me to stop. All I have to do is say I want to stop, and I stop. But as long as I go to work and it's fun, and I don't say fun in the sense that it's negative, it's a positive sense. And in many ways, I've never worked a day in my life. I mean, I get a huge salary that one could argue with I deserve, but I get a huge salary, and I get paid for doing what's fun to me. I love helping people, and so I get paid to help people, to teach doctors, to teach residents, to teach medical students, and to teach other people. And so this has been fun. It's been a joy of my life, and it's been what I believe God has ordained me to do. And this is live my life to the honor and glory of God, and doing everything I can to the best of my ability so that He can get the glory. And this to me is what I was destined to do from the time I was born.
So you may have answered this, but I want to still ask as a general thought as we're summing up. Of what are you most proud?
What I'm most proud, and I actually say this in my resume, my one-page resume, is that I would love to be remembered as a God-fearing surgeon who reached the unreachable stars. And to think that I, as a little kid from Harlem who was running around in the streets, running around the church, grew up to be somebody who could make a difference and help so many people along the way. it's something that I just can't thank God enough that I grew up, I emerged from that mischievous little child to become a helpful and successful transplant surgeon who has been able to reach the unreachable stars and have the impossible dream come true. The greatest blessing that I've ever had in my life was one day I spent the night doing a transplant. The next morning, it was a Sunday, I went and gave a sermon in church. And I got a standing ovation, and I thought that was it. That was the day of my life. That was the most happy of my life. Because I did my surgery, a transplant, the kidney made urine on the table, and then I went and gave my testimony, and it was received well. That, to me, that was it. That's the acme of my life.
Now we will hear from Dr. James Shopshire, Professor Emeritus at Wesley Theological Seminary. The first clip is solely audio and recalls Ku Klux Klan marches. Then we move to videos related to his work at the seminary, concerns about DC gentrification, and his thoughts on the development of a minority-majority nation.
We moved to Coweta County, and that was in Newman and Granville, Georgia. I must have been about 8 or 10 years old. And it was not an uncommon thing to see them. You know, they would have them in these small towns. And Granville was a small town of about 2,500 people. And so I was able to witness Klan marches there. Later, my dad was appointed to Griffin, Georgia, and we saw Klan marches in Griffin, Georgia.
Daytime, nighttime?
Usually daytime. Nighttime was too tricky, even for the Klan. To be out there in the dark. So usually it was during the day.
And what would you do? Do you remember any of your feelings around the first time you saw people actually walking down the street in hoods?
Yeah. After being told, you know, and we're told fairly early, you know, what that means, we generally just retired, went home, you know, and stayed out of sight. Now, I lived long enough to see young black children watching the march and pointing fingers and saying some gosh awful things about Klan people.
and not being lynched.
And not being lynched. Yeah.
Did you ever witness a lynching?
No, I didn't.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
But as a child, do you recall being afraid? Do you recall what your parents told you to do as a young black boy? Were there any particular instructions that they gave you to help you cope?
Always. There are things that you avoid, things that you did not do, especially around certain people, people who are Caucasian or white, and you learn very early about those things. My dad is one of my heroes, and he was clear about the social meaning of religion and the social situation in which black folks lived during those segregated years in particular. When we were in Griffin, Georgia, he was one of the organizers of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the chapter in Griffin, Georgia. After which time he received a threat. You better be out of town, you know, and if you don't go, you're in trouble. In response to that, having been raised in a family where guns were commonly present, was to say, well, I'm going to tote myself, my 38 for a while, and he did for several years. He never had an incident that I knew about.
Were you afraid?
Yeah, we were afraid during those times. And there were times when after a certain threat or what have you, someone would stay at the house, you know, to join him, just in case, you know, we had some kind of incident. We were frightened as children. And of course, I lived long enough during the time that I was pastoring in Iowa to receive threats myself. A key partner to Wesley Seminary, along with other congregations. But as a large congregation, the seminary learned things, especially as relates to historically black churches. And Asbury was able to contribute a number of people who brought gifts and grace, to the seminary situation. So that ongoing relationship with the seminary has been an important one, I think. I always use the term during my years, not so much professor, but lead teacher learner. Because I realized that in adult education there were a lot of folks who came to the seminary with not only good common sense, but they were people who had gifts and points of view, that contributed to the whole teaching learning process. And so there were situations where I was the learner and they were the teachers, and others where I was the lead teacher and they were the learners. And I think that I was right on the mark in relating to students. And that was all students, not only the historically black students. And I had the opportunity to relate to black students who were struggling, needing to work. I was one of the first professors to say, yes, I'll teach at night. In fact, I learned a lot coming at night because it was, not only did it serve an important purpose for students who had to work, but it also meant that I was able to avoid some of the traffic getting to and from.
And you spoke a little bit about it in the community because they didn't have any African American staff. Did black students follow after that?
It increased. There were staff members at Wesley, but they were the custodians and the volunteers from the women's groups and so forth. And I do need to mention Reverend John Satterwhite, who was AME Zion, who for all intents and purposes, was a faculty member, but it was more an adjunct relationship that he had. When Dr. Morrison came, he was the first explicit tenure track graduate of University of Chicago. So he came as a tenure track person. And I was the second when I came in 1980, followed by Dr. William B. McLean in 1981, tenure track.
So this relationship that you mentioned between Asbury and Wesley, was it deliberate, intentional, fostered, or was it just serendipitous?
I think it was deliberate. Reverend Frank Williams, who pastored Asbury, was also on the board with Wesley at the time. He and some other African Americans who were on the board participated in this whole matter, making certain that we got black folks, who not only were adjuncts, and there were other adjuncts who served very well. Then Reverend Forrest Stiff, now Bishop Stiff, has been an important, not only adjunct to Wesley, but many gifts to the church, the general church, and to Wesley Seminary. So that, I think in that regard, the church and many of the people made contributions. Now let me say one more thing about the students. My coming was supported by black students who formed the Association of Black Seminaries. That was one of the groups that I interviewed with when I finally came. And they were clear that they wanted not just custodians and people who fixed the meal, they wanted professors. So they gave the thumbs up to my coming.
your transition from Atlanta to living in Washington, D.C. What was Washington, D.C. like for you as a man coming here in the 80s? What did you think of the then chocolate city?
Yeah, I was happy that I was able to follow that and to do some of my teaching based on that fact of the chocolate city as it struggled through it. I've seen it now transform to a mocha again, and we don't know how far it's going to go, but it's clearly different. There have been transitions that have taken place. Not so much. Too many black folks, I think, have been pushed out. In the first place, we can't afford, even some professionals, black professionals, teachers and others, police, others who at one time would have been happy to live in the district where they serve, but the increasing numbers of them can't afford it anymore. And that's happening with gentrification in cities all over the country.
What does that mean in the future?
I think I have some ideas, some that I dread, and that is that in some regards, because of the political economy, we're going to be pushed right out of the city. I have a friend who is in construction, and there's all kinds of construction have been taking place in the city. He tells me, oh, we're just finishing up a building, and the rent is going to run $6,000 a month. I don't know many people, black or white, but especially black, who will be able to move into those buildings right down in certain choice areas of the downtown area. So the changes that are taking place, and of course the district government about it says, oh, it's wonderful. See how things are coming up, and we don't worry as much about income because the taxes get paid, and we can do things. But when you start asking the question, how is it impacting people on the streets, people who just barely can afford to pay rent or mortgage, who will be pushed out. And only the people who come with their pockets brimming with money will be the people who will live in the very choice areas. That's not a good thing, I don't think. The church has to help deal with the broken places in the polity of the nation and the city. Since this is a very special city in the life of the nation. That I have grown considerably in terms of understanding teaching as a ministry of the church. And for those who serve in seminaries in particular, perhaps also in higher education, a teaching ministry and the grasp of it is very important. I mentored a lot of young folks, black, white, Asian, and occasional Hispanic or Latino in their matriculation through Wesley Seminary. I think that I had a special responsibility and relationship to black folks as they went through. And I think that I made a contribution to their understanding of what it means to be black in very positive and very negative relationships with the wider communities. 25 years ago, I was reading the studies that said, hey, at a point in time, we're going to be a minority-majority nation. And we have seen that develop. As a result, we have seen a backlash that can be a observed not only in the United Methodist Church, but in this nation as a whole. There are a few students of all racial identities who gathered. There were many, many more out there. I was dabbling in stuff that the Lord didn't care about. The fact is now that churches and religion, Christian faith in particular, but churches and religion have a very important responsibility in helping this United Methodist Church and this nation to survive, because we don't understand and appreciate it, and we aren't able to relate in very constructive ways.
Very much, Dr. Shopshire. Next, we will feature General Audrey Drake, former leader in the Veterans Affairs Office of Nursing Services, who will talk about Asbury dwellings, being a DC National Guard commander, being deployed to Desert Storm, and her interest in preventing homelessness.
Connected with Asbury United Methodist Church. What year was that?
Well, Ruben, when he came here to go to school, his pastor in North Carolina had told him to find Frank William. So that's how we Ruben started to come to church. So years old, I married, I naturally started to come to church with Ruben. So that's how I became a member of Asbury.
So he was already a member of Asbury?
Oh, he was attending. We joined together in 1977.
I see. Okay. And so Frank Williams was a pastor at that time?
He was.
Tell me a bit about him. What do you remember about him most?
Well, I remember him being a very caring person who gave outstanding sermons. Sermons that, he was focused on, the life as a Christian and the relationship with God. He was a shepherd of the flock. He was an administrator. He was responsible for the G1 this part of it. It was during his tenure that G1 was there.
The fellowship hall for the Asbury United Methodist Church?
Yes, and he was also worked with Dr. Josephine to get the grant and the relationship with her to establish Asbury dwellings.
So he worked with Reverend Joseph Larry at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to get this Asbury dwellings. Could you explain Asbury dwellings, what it is?
Asbury dwelling is, we actually, with that grant was renovated what people call the old Shaw School. Yes, and it's now 147 apartments for seniors. You have to qualify to live there. But the nice thing about it is affordable housing, regardless of how much rent goes up. The residents only pay they get $3,000.
Whatever their income is, they just pay a third of it to live. And you're speaking about this in part because you're intimately aware of it because you ended up being on the board.
I am the vice president of the board of directors.
How long have you been on there for? As I think about the location of Asbury dwellings, there is a lot going on there. Gentrification is the right word?
Yes, and gentrification, and people want that building in the worst kind of ways. I don't get as many as Herman Thompson, who is the president, but there are constantly people wanting to buy that building. And you know what we have here was they did.
What happened?
They were turned into condos and charged that maximum rent.
So what does the board think about that prospect?
None. Nobody. We don't even entertain those letters. We don't have any property. That property belongs to the church and to the residents, senior citizens of the state.
People are committed to that.
Right, we are committed to that. We have no reason to want to do anything else on that property. Became the first nurse there, commander unit over at the DC National Guard.
medical staff reporting to me, doctors, dentists, technicians, everybody reporting to me. And actually, we had to do some downsizing because we was no longer a mass unit. We were becoming more of a health and dental clinic. So I worked with them to do that downsizing by attrition and by assigning people who need to go to other units. But one of the things we had to do was to remodel that unit. So I called everybody together who had the doctors, the lab technicians, the clerical staff, everybody, and we went around and looked at the unit and decided where we could best locate things and how we could make it more efficient for everybody who was working. And there were some things you couldn't move, like where certain electrical things or plumbing kinds of things were located. So that unit was done, and so when they got ready to dedicate that unit, I was actually honored by that the Brigadier General retired Audrey Drake Health and Dental Clinic. And at the time we dedicated, it had so much computer technology and things. And the commanding general told me, he said, Audrey, I'm coming down here using this because some of the things in this clinic are more updated than the things that I have, which he didn't have to tell me because by that time I was retired. But,
So where is this located exactly?
it is located in Louisiana.
And what does it mean to you to have something named for you after all your work?
Well, first of all, it was kind of surprising that they would want to do that. And they asked me, and then I agreed. I thought it was an honor, especially since I had been, again, the first nurse to ever come back to command unit. And when we were deployed to Desert Storm, we were, I think, the only unit where all of the practical nurses were actually licensed. So actually, the National Guard Bureau made that a requirement after we deployed to Desert Storm.
You were sort of a model for the country.
Right, for that, yes. And that was there's some standards you have to, and I always have a standard taking care of anybody. If I didn't want these people taking care of my parents, I didn't want them taking care of anybody else. They could take care of me because I knew what they were doing that wasn't right, but my parents wouldn't know. So that was my criteria for anybody taking care of patients. And one of I opened, but I was working at the VA Medical Center here in Washington, 120-bed nursing home. We were first deployed down to Fort Belmore, where we practiced all the stuff that you they think you're going to need to do. And I remember how upset one of those active duty people got with us because we insisted on Sunday having church. We had church, but they made us work till like 9 o'clock at night because they had not wanted us to take the time out for church on Sunday morning, but we did. So we practice all the things that you think you're going to do, including if you were attacked by gas masks and putting on all that equipment and being able to drink and eat. And it's interesting. I had to, people can be so helpful for you. They're always somebody wanting to help me, but I said, no. If I get put out alone, I won't have any help. But once we got over there, we had to set up the hospital. After we did that a few times, and they found out the units moved faster than the troops moved faster than MASH units could. So we combined with the combat support hospital. This was that big general hospital. A combat support hospital backs up, it's like a Walter Reed, but it's in the field. So
we combined with them, and I worked with the active duty nurse, and she and I were in charge of all the nursing staff. And we actually did survey. In fact, one of our anesthetists was the first one to give, one of the DC Guard anesthetists was the first one to give anesthesia in that hospital.
So you were working, overseeing men and women in the field,
Right.
in nursing?
Yes, and we had an intensive care unit, we had an operating room, we had general med, surgeries.
So you mentioned that when you were doing the drills and preparing, people were upset because you took time for church. How did you deal with your faith through that? How did your faith lift you or help you through it, and how did you do active faith?
The faith was very active, and we actually had a wonderful chaplain who was the social pastors at People's Congregation at the church.
In D.C.?
Yes,
In D.C.?
yeah, he was at that time.
And he was in the Guard?
Right. And he was a lieutenant, and some of the senior officers of the armies would kind of not look down on him and wouldn't. But he was a wonderful chaplain. We had services every Sunday. We had special services. We had ash raising services, and he did, the ashes. And we took a piece of paper, something that we wanted to get rid of forever, and acid. He took them and put them in a little container and burned them. And he found palms for Palm Sunday, and I remember it was like 105, 100 something degrees that day. And an ice cream truck came by, and they only sold pipes of ice cream, so we bought a pint native. Easter Sunday morning, just like every other Sunday, there was some white surgeon we had never seen at church before. When we got there Easter Sunday morning, they were all lined up on the platform, just like they were sitting up there just as nice as anything like they had been coming to church.
So Easter was a big day there as well.
Right, yes. And I made Easter dinner. I told people, we had MREs. I had asparagus and carrots and some other things. You have to get your own MRE ham and bring it if you want to have Easter dinner. I could have the vegetables, we have sage cookies and stuff like that. So we had Easter dinner.
So your Easter dinner was all MREs?
Yes.
And say what MREs are? Just
So meals ready to eat in the military.
so it wasn't perhaps as tasty as one at home, but you still had it.
We still celebrated, yes. Yes, but we had church service every Sunday morning. And I had people laughing. We had these benches, boards on 7 o'clock. If you didn't get up in unison, the last person, people who got dumped. so
That's where you were sitting in service.
that's when we were sitting in church. So we were like, okay, is everybody ready? I thought, people about it, ask them to look at me and they said, oh, you're going to ask her that. I said, yes, but I have been in churches for all kinds of churches. I think if they say where 2 or 3 are gathered around the flagpole, sitting on wooden benches, it doesn't matter if it's what you're there for, so to worship, and that's what we did.
Why was it important for you to worship in the midst of all of that?
Well, I think, it was part of my support and strength, as I said, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. That was one of the Bible verses that I remember that helped me through that. And one of those who wait on the Lord shall renew those strength. So we were out there waiting somewhere. You just waited because, military to get at that meeting, you get a hurry and go somewhere, and you just sat.
On the Community Partnership for the Prevention of Homelessness.
Yes.
Still doing that.
Still doing that.
And tell me about why you feel that's so important, what you feel is going to accomplish with that.
Well, it's just to me in the city where you have homes, you live in homes over $1 million. You have people who don't have homes at all. And, it makes me so sad. It makes me so sad. And when I go to get my hand on, that's the one thing I still do. When I first came here in 1970, I tell you, I bet you I passed 100 shops or more. Driving from where I live over to Southeast Washington on Minnesota Avenue to get my but I still do that. And then I'm coming back under this overpass.
and it was the same thing, just always sitting there under this all that. And when we go down to Kaiser for a women's doctor's appointment, there's a bunch of these tents, and it's just so sad to see people who don't have dependable housing. One of the things that we try to do is to prevent people from becoming homeless in the beginning. And the harder problem is there are some resources available that people don't know are available. And that is the one thing that I have been able to do is to, if I know somebody having problems or it comes to my attention, to get them in touch with the right. If I send an email with the name to the executive director, she will assign somebody to work with the person and will get that person back to me when the issue is resolved.
Who's the executive director of this partnership?
Yes.
You'll help individual people.
Yes. Also, one of the things I did early on, the executive director was aware of my grant from veterans, and she sent me the application to review along with a letter asking me to write a letter of recommendation for her since I was a retired delegate, and I did that, and we got the grant. And then the second time around, we actually got it from like $1 million. So that's one of the groups that I'm very happy to see that we're doing more with respect to the sad to have people who fight for this country and come back in the house.
And often the homeless people are veterans.
Right.
So that $1 million, what will that help with?
Well, I heard it would help get placement to get them into homes. She can do things like, the grant will do things like give them transportation, if they need babysitting funds, and sometimes they can get jobs, but they don't have means for child care. So it has a variety of things in it that would help them to actually get jobs and keep them from being homeless.
And that was fairly recent?
It's ongoing. It's ongoing. And they do, this group does the point in time, every January there's one night where you count on the homeless people. Yeah, but we're responsible for that, which is responsible for that.
Here's what I remember very vividly. I was in the 8th grade. It was 1968, and spring of '68, and Fred had Martin Luther King was killed. We were released early from school, but because I did grow up in a disciplined household where it was very important that your work ethic was something I learned from both my parents, my mom and dad. I had a part-time job, and it was way up 16th Street. It was a Webster All-Girl college, female women's college, and got on the bus to go to my part-time job that evening. And this story is about work ethic. Riots were happening all over U Street. I was on a bus that the bus driver had us to get off the bus at 16th and U. But I knew I had to go to work. So I walked all the way up to 16th and Kellenmeyer. And got to work. Really, no one expected that I would be there. And we actually, it was myself and another guy that worked up there, we wound up having to stay up there that evening because that evening when we left work, we got on 16th Street and we actually got shot at. Yeah. So we actually had to run down the alley back to Webster College. They put us up for the night.
How old were you again?
I was, I had just turned 14. I turned 14 in March, this was in April. And called mom, told her I was
okay, and so came home the next day. Likewise, we get on 16th Street, we couldn't even catch a cab. No one would pick myself and this other guy I was with, a couple years older than I was, but also African American. So we walked all the way home to 5th and L Street Northeast. But here's what I remember as we walked past, Mount Vernon Square, right there not far from Asbury. Remember how pungent the smell of tear gas was from the day before. And when I finally got home, and all of the neighborhood stores, all the stores on Main Street, the haberdashers and department stores had been rioted, had been looted. And during the riots, they had been looted. And it was just an incredible, it was just a very turbulent time in America. Some of the situations I may have had as a African American, as a black person, as a black officer in the Air Force, and I remember in many cases I would find myself in places where I was the only black officer, for that matter, only black person in an environment. I do remember when I was on a remote assignment to Republic of Korea, in South Korea. I was on an assignment there for a year, remote from my family. And we had a very specialized project to bed down this weapon system called F-16, and they needed certain, there were certain logistical requirements in bedding down this, or preparing for this weapon system coming to country. And as a civil engineer officer, I was responsible for going around to these various sites to make sure that it was set up accordingly. And I do remember meeting one officer who was of the majority race, a white person, who asked me, I'm there with two other individuals that are junior to me, and he was in the middle of telling us something that was classified, and he stopped and said, looked at me, not the other individuals, said, are you cleared? And I just shook my head and said, yes, I am. But in my head, I was thinking, you only asked me, you didn't ask anyone else. That was common fare. And it was those kinds of things that happen on occasions by certain individuals that would give you pause, would give me pause. But likewise in the military, because incidentally the military was, quite frankly, where race relationships was really, where it really matured, and military set the standard for the rest of America for the most part. So I have equal stories about individuals that saw someone who was working harder, doing better than peers, and elevated me to officer of the quarter, officer of the year, who also happened to be someone of a different race.
Prepare you for what you see in Washington, D.C. today in terms of the gentrification that's taking place. I know we talked about your neighborhood, the original on L Street, and having lived there for so many years. What's your impression when you walk through there nowadays?
Oh yeah, we've seen that. As a matter of fact, I routinely say if I hadn't grown up here and they were doing the transition, I routinely say if you dropped me out the sky and asked me where was I wouldn't have a clue, because it's so different from growing up where we had very low-rise buildings where development was very slow, where we had, especially after the riots of '68, where we had vacant lots all over the place, just where business people would not invest, and kids growing up here had to make the best out of what they had. Also, when I think about some of the books we had in public school and the lack of really good Black history, because it was written by people who didn't know Black history. But I've seen an incredible change. A lot has changed. There's been a lot of development. You talk about gentrification. The demographic here in Washington, D.C. has changed immensely. I remember when purportedly they were over 90, it was like 90% Black. I don't think that number is exactly what it was. I think it was something closer in the 70s, but I know now it's probably close to the 50s or less. But there's been a development explosion where I remember walking from 5th and L Street Northeast to 11th and K Street Northwest. And as I mentioned, low-rise buildings. A lot of my friends that went to Terrell Junior High School and went on to Dunbar, they lived there. All of those are gone. Commerce has happened. That's all high-rise condos and high rent, I might add. We've seen the streets developed. For goodness sakes, the trolley car, which is just a novelty for a certain demographic that would have never been put there back when I was growing up, and it really was a chocolate city. That's a good question. I will tell you whatever it is, and I'll try to answer the question, but whatever it is, we'll surmount it. You think about this, Asbury is almost as old as Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has only been here since 1790. Asbury's been here since 1836. So we're coming up on 200 years. And we've gone through a lot. I mean, just the edifice alone is, we're on the third one. I expect it will still be there, but the point is, these are, times have changed, they've been changing, they didn't just start. What's in the next chapter? I think as long as we continue to be a place where people can worship, as long as we can be a place where we can serve, as long as we recognize our community and really provide service to that community, and as long as we're a faithful church, as long as we're a faithful church.
What does a faithful church feel like for you?
Putting God first, which means whatever we do, because, you know, Asbury, as we talk about it, I think as we think about it, we think about that great structure on the corner of 11th and K Street. But the church is in each one of us. And I remember a young minister when we were out in Kansas, Tyrone Gordon, saying, sometimes you are the only people will only see Christ when they see you. Sometimes you will be the only Bible anyone will ever read. So you have to present yourself as such. And they need to know that there's a grace of God in all of us, but it has to be exemplified in each one of us, which means the way I present myself. And then when I tell someone that I'm an Asbury or that invite them to Asbury, they may be inclined to come because they see something that would draw them to that edifice. But each one of us is the church, and we can't be confused about that. And so I think when I say faithful, I think we have to put God first, and we have to have faith that if we're doing His will, Asbury will not just survive, but thrive.
All of our narrators, I think we will all agree that we need to give Ms. Adelle Banks a just amazing hand for getting those videos out there. Fabulous material that we had to work with. So right now, we're going to take a very short break. I'm going to say, what, we can do 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Now, when we reconvene, I'm going to ask, because we are still videoing, if you use the bathrooms there, can you just, hold the door? So try not to bang it if you can. If you're eating chips or something like that, try not to crackle them. Just give it a little mindfulness about what we're trying to do here, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Thank you very much.
You might have. Thank you again, everyone, for participating in this oral history project. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it and how much we've learned from all of you. As a group, although you come from a variety of places, you are united in your service to Asbury United Methodist Church. Can each of you share just a bit your thoughts on the significance of Asbury to the District of Columbia? And go in what and please use a mic.
Yes,
It's on, just put it closer to your mic.
the significance of Asbury and Washington, in my mind, is huge. First of all, not only Asbury, but of course the religious community, and especially the African American church community. First of all, what is a city without a church, or without churches? And what is Washington without? When we were here before slavery ended, and we certainly were here as a church shortly after slavery ended. So it's important historically to the city. It's important historically, or just as a matter of humanity, that you understand that the world recognizes that this is a place where America exists in its entirety. And so for us to not have churches, and for us to not have this particular African American church, it's just, I can't imagine that it could exist, and yet we know that we're fighting in order to make sure that that doesn't happen.
I believe that Asbury has a responsibility and an opportunity to model something very special in ministry in this city. Most of you are aware of the fact that we are one block up the street from one of the churches that came after Asbury, and yet it's a part of it is one of our sister congregations. Asbury has led the way in so many ministries, not only for Washington, but for the United Methodist Church and the nation. I hope that we can continue to do that we can overcome the obstacles. The churches that I call the historic old black first churches are in trouble in most of the areas. You can go up and down the eastern seaboard and you will find that those churches are in effect in a state of decline. The hope is that Asbury can lead the way. Asbury remains one of the strongest, by the way, and that Asbury can grasp ministry and provide service that will fulfill what we claim as our vision. That is to serve God and to love persons, His community, and society.
I agree with Dr. Shopshire that we have opportunities, and this church has a lot of historical value, but we should build on the history and continue to serve our communities and reach out to those who community to become a part of Asbury. And I know that some of us are working on that, and we do that by partnering with some of the people who are trying to serve the needs of the community, and we're beginning to do that in a different way. But that would also help us to remain here for another 185 years.
Thank you. I think it's important for Asbury to survive. And I think as long as, as you stated in your presentation, as long as we actually serve our community, whatever that community is, I think that we will play a significant role in the history of the District of Columbia. But I think the critical issue is that we do the things that have previously been mentioned, that we serve the community and give of ourselves and keep God first, and with our faith, the rest will follow.
So, I think Asbury is really important to DC history. We've already talked about some of the things, some of the critical nodes in periods in history, through the Civil Rights Movement, and for that matter, even before that, doing slavery and the like. But, and so that's a history that's already baked. But I want to talk about the future history of DC. And I think it is important for Asbury to resist the urge, like other churches have, to remain in downtown DC. As it's already been alluded to, it is not uncommon throughout many urban environments that downtown churches are folding. They're finding themselves moving to the suburbs or other places. And I think we need to resist that urge because there is a community right here around us. And I think it is important for that community. We talked about the development here in the downtown cluster. It deserves a church as well. And we are that church, and I think we have a firm foundation. I would even liken them to the roots of a tree that are sunk deep into DC, into Washington, D.C. And I think it really is important for us to build on those roots. And I would even venture to say the legacy. I feel like all of us, I certainly feel like myself, standing on the shoulders of all the ancestors before us, and I'm talking about the ancestors to this church specifically. And so I think it really is important for us to consider the importance of the future history of DC and the role that Asbury United Methodist Church plays in it.
Thank you, everyone. So now it's your turn. Anybody who has a question, we're going to pass the mic around.
My question is not necessarily for the panel itself, but for the organization of the panel. How many years of collective membership does this panel represent?
How many years of collective membership? So I got to calculate.
I could just round it off to a whole lot.
Well, I guess I've been here since 1973.
64 years.
I've been here because I can relate it to my marriage, so I've been here for at least 42 years. We just have an anniversary on Tuesday.
For many years. some 35 years.
And being the person that I am, I've been here all my life.
Baptized in this church.
Yes, at least 256.
Okay, next question.
Okay. It's really a comment. I just want to thank you guys. I was so proud of you as I was watching the film. And I thought about how I've known most of you for years. I was just thankful that you were willing to tell your stories. I know it took time. I know it took arranging your lives in order to do it. But I thought, as you asked the question about the future of Asbury and whether it's important that we be here, what I saw was, from listening to your stories, how this church has nurtured or sustained leadership. Leadership at the local level, leadership at the community level, and leadership at the national level. And that's incredibly important. And there are not a lot of institutions that Black people have where this kind of leadership can emerge. So I thank you, but I also think it's a charge to the rest of us to keep the institutions alive and healthy.
I'd like for you to elaborate more on how you might envision the church serving the community, because several of you talked about we should serve the community. Could you elaborate on how you might envision Asbury serving this community that they're in?
So I've thought about this a lot. You know, we talked about the demographic changing, and I think by and large, people are all the same by and large. But more importantly, I think the tradition of activity has changed. What I'm really getting at is I think we're starting to figure this out with the bridge. And serving our community has changed. When I grew up, the community here was, was largely residential. That's changed. And so I think it is important for us to adjust to the community surrounding us. And we talked about the neighbor to neighbor, because there are a lot of people that have a not dependable shelter or homeless people. That's one. But there's a huge transient population here. What I really mean is people that show up here in the downtown area on some routine, but they don't live here. They're traveling through. We've engaged those kinds of individuals. You see them, they come into our sanctuary at 8:30 and 10:30 services, and we sometimes engage them. I remember on a number of occasions, my wife and I, as we talk to individuals, when we find out we have some affinity to them, either they are visiting us from overseas, we lived in Europe for a period of time, we strike up a conversation and invite them back. In one case, it was a lady from Iowa. My daughter went to school in Iowa. She wound up going to brunch with us. And the long story short, what I'm really getting at is there are some people that come here to these hotels and transit facilities. They're here routinely. When I travel, for instance, I will find a church that's in the area that I go to all the time, and I'll make that a part of my routine on Sundays. I think individuals do that as well. So, to be more specific in addressing your questions, Vanessa, I would say that it would be a good idea that we work on branding ourselves, marketing ourselves, making ourselves known to some of the hotels in the area. Maybe be a pamphlet in their lobby, because you'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't, how often people come down to the concierge and say, hey, I'm looking for a church to attend. Where can you suggest I go? And it would be great if on the tip of their tongue is Asbury United Methodist Church is right up here on 11 and K Street. So I think that is one way. For the sum, I would say we address the community that we have now.
I would just add to that, very often, sometimes we aren't aware of the efforts that are already being made. Sometimes not aware that, for example, that Asbury's already reached out to schools and adopted a school and some other things like that. And that's the kind of thing that we need to do. In other words, for example, there is a community here that's predominantly Latino and Hispanic. And so we need to try to find ways to be linguistically appropriate to deal with that. We also know that there's a very affluent community that's right next door to us. And we need to try to find ways to try to reach them. And then also, I know that we also have tried to reach the councils, and of course, one of the things that you notice when you go to the council meetings is that there really are African American people who make up the councils. So it's going to be important for us to understand who our community is, all varieties of that community, and think more appropriate approaches, the way in which we can help them see that we're here. Sometimes in Harlem, where I grew up, sometimes they have for the church Ebenezer, which is a small church, they have to let the tourists know this is a place you can go to see how African American churches behave, and that's one of the things that can be done anyway.
I'll try to be brief. Is it on?
Yes.
I think that Asbury can serve faithfully and effectively if it develops a structural approach to ministry. Now, I taught for 40 years in the seminary. I pastored for 10 years and spent 40 years teaching in the seminary. And one of the constructs that I developed had to do with assessing need, problem, issue, prospect, and developing ministry around a structure that is personalistic and pastoral. And Asbury has done very well with that. Educating, that is educating ourselves as well as those around us. Third is to develop forms of advocacy. Sometimes your presence and your word makes the difference in the lives of a lot of people. We can do that if we can begin to work on the larger issues. On those issues generally get you in trouble politically. But those are the important areas of ministry. And the fifth area is what I call structural reconstructive ministry. Those ministries seek to reconstruct, to join forces with other people who have similar interests, or those who have similar values and are willing to work with others to make some things happen. That is the most difficult area of ministry, because you step on toes. You worry the people who are able to make a lot of money in the city. It doesn't matter to those people how many people get crushed or pushed out. So when you start doing structural reconstructive ministry, there are open possibilities. Some of this is already happening at Asbury. I hope that more of it can happen. Personalistic pastoral, neighbor to neighbor, perfect, wonderful. Personalistic pastoral. The educational units and the classes that are being sponsored now, that gets at the area not only to do basic theology, but to apply theology. When it comes to advocacy, Asbury is able to speak out. The whole matter of the medical care, it took a lot of people working a long time to develop that. Now the structural reconstruction, that's difficult. That portends that we would join forces with other congregations, that we would get over our denominationalism so that we can do some things very broadly with others. And so when issues like a changing community confronts us with a desire on the part of some in this context who want to run a rail right down in front of the church and grab off 12 feet from Asbury that has been here now since 1836. So that's the structural reconstructive kind of stuff, and not just for ourselves, for the lives of others. We, in the last few days, I think we closed the last of the what do you call the areas where?
Talking about DC General?
Yes.
Shelters.
The shelters. The shelters.
You closed DC General as a shelter, and what's being done now is a shelter is being opened in each ward, and I would say we, because Ward 4 was the first one to open there. They had river cutting back in September, and they started taking residents 2 weeks later. I noticed that I think Ward 7 was dedicated within the last couple of weeks, and they should be getting people now. But DC General closed on the 30th. If there were any residents left there, they are now being housed in hotels.
Yes. We have we have time for one more question.
But I'd like to give one more example of related to the health, and I'll be very brief. Because I was on the board with the executive director of our Unity, and working through him that we were able to first get introduced together the band to come here on the 4th Sundays, so that the people who come to the neighbor breakfast also have access to health.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel for your faith and your service. It's a general question for the entire panel, especially Daddy up there, for instilling it in me. I'm a public school teacher, and I look at my kids and I think about the future of the country and the role that faith has in where we've come from and where we've got to go. And I want to ask our panel, our esteemed panel, for some suggestions about what we can do to pass that on to the younger generation. Because we sit here and talk about the future, but they are the future. And I listen to the kids, and they have attitudes, they have guns, they have a general desire to win. But they don't have very much faith, and I don't see that they have very much God. And the older that I get, the more important I see that is in all our lives. You got to have some God, you got to have some morality, you got to have a direction and a purpose. So, based on your lives and your experience, what can we do to instill it in the younger kids? Because I try and do it where I am, where I can. And sometimes I get in trouble. Oh, that's too religious, so leave that out. But I work with the kids, and I know this is exactly what they need. This is what the school needs, this is what the community needs, this is what the country needs. And I just want, based on what you've seen and what you've experienced, your advice, what can we do to help pass it on to the younger generation and instill that and nurture that?
I would sort of like to comment on that simply because my experience in the classroom for 25 years was one in which I felt that telling kids historically the important things that happened in my life, that happened in my parents' life, that happened in my grandparents' life, were mirrors from which they could draw. And I actually shared with my students many times, and this is sometimes apropos, sometimes not, but it's just an example, that my grandmother came here from Mississippi after my parents moved here. She was a laundress. She was a smart woman, who, of course, who came from Mississippi and had no formal training. But she was such a good laundress that she had a waiting list of people who wanted her to come once a week to do their laundry. If they wanted her to cook, she would say, I'm a laundress, maybe you need to find somebody else, because that's what I do. But she did her job so well that she had a list of people who wanted her to come. It's just one example of how we can say to children, or to young people, the importance of doing the job that you have at hand while you wait for a better job, or while you find what it is that you really want to do, because here's how we've made it so far. Here's how we've gotten where we are. And this kind of ethic, and there are many, many examples of this in our history that can be supportive of children, in spite of the fact that they do have guns, that there are drugs on the street, and that how do you get them to see that there's a vision that they can have that's beyond all of this.
There are all kinds of difficult and scary prospects out there for a son. If, in fact, we take seriously the need for what one of our now deceased black ministers called retrospect prospect, looking at the history, the nature of the struggle, how our foreparents got it done, and then look at our situation now, do the analysis. I always got in trouble in the seminary with this, because I'd say to the students, if you don't do the analysis, all your prayers are going to make a whole lot of difference. It's a part of this prayer as well. So the prospect of developing new ways, we're in trouble in this nation. Public education is little by little being wiped out. And at the same time, the people who want to educate their children are developing other schools and ways of doing that. So we have to develop ways in which to make schools work that we have and to prevent them from being wiped out. And then we have those special schools. What was it? Freedom schools. Freedom schools. I sometimes feel so bad about the fact that in the technological cyber world, a lot of our children just don't get the foundations that they need to participate in that. And so more and more, you look at the young people who are at Google and what have you, and you see what appear to be Latino faces, Asian faces, and white faces, and you may see one or two black faces. We won't be able to participate and develop in those developments in our world if we don't do some things like help with not only reading and English, but math and science. And those of us who have had certain kinds of experiences and educations, making ourselves available so that we can do something in terms of special schooling. You know? And sometimes you'd be surprised at the difference it makes when you just have some time and can bring some of your gifts and talents to the work of serving children. That will help. That's not a full answer, son, but that will help us.
And Deanna, don't leave yet. remember the reading groups that we worked with. We met periodically with students, and then I don't remember all the details, but all of us were assigned to one student. But we all came together and kind of shared things from our background, and it was like a mentoring for them. In addition to reading, they got to know more about our lives. They wanted to know what I had done in the military and some of the challenges I had. So if we could do something like that with the schools that we're partnering with right now, I think that would have to. But there were like 5 or 6 of us who worked with 5 students, and we did it twice in that year. And I thought it was a very meaningful experience to me, and I thought it was very meaningful for them.
Thank you. Is that Cardell, you going to have the last word?
Okay, so I would just say charity begins at home. And I would say each one of us could just be a good example to those who are around us. And I would say this when it comes to children, they hear everything you say, but they only listen to the things you do. So I think it really is important for us to realize how important the family unit is. We talk a lot about schools. Schools are important, but I got to tell you the truth. I grew up in a neighborhood where there was guns and drugs and the like, but I grew up in a house with a mother and a father who had certain values that they imparted to all of us. And so I think it is important that the values that we share with those that come behind us is really important, because I don't care where they go, they can apply those.
I also want to commend, because that's a beautiful thing, and there are some young people, and there are some young people here, and that is where it starts, no? And I think that, General Drake, the point you made about the schools that we partner with, I think that's an excellent marketing opportunity to reach out and try to get some of those young people involved in programs that we're doing and let them know what's going on. We are right at 4 o'clock. Ruth, you have some presentations you want to make to our panelists, and then we're going to ask Reverend Mills if she will just say a word and pray us out of here. All right.
Can we thank again our distinguished panelists for sharing parts of their life with us, inspiring parts of their life. For those for whom they may be people you didn't know, again, we have Mrs. Josephine Baker, Dr. James Shopshire, General Audrey Drake, Dr. Clive Callender, and Colonel Cardell Richardson. Thank you for the wonderful gift of your life and how you share it in the community as well as in this faith community. Let us also thank the members of the Oral History Committee. Would those members please stand so that we can thank you. And there are others who helped to make this program possible. Would they all stand as well? Anybody else present?
Who helped so beautifully with
Set up and I believe the Oral History Committee is maybe a subset of the Archives and History Committee. So all the members of Archives and History, please stand. And of course, we thank God. Amen. So let us look to the Lord then to be dismissed. Lord God, we give you thanks for this great day, for the lives of the people who have been highlighted this afternoon. We thank you for the gift of their presence and the wonderful contributions they have made to this congregation, to this community, to the community where they live. We're grateful for our Archives and History Committee and projects like this. May we continue to the world through these efforts and through more. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.
We are dismissed.